Hello, everyone, and welcome to what I think is going to be maybe my favorite episode ever of Training Unleashed. I have John Lay with me. He's the CEO of Talent Learning, and what he really is a person that understands this industry like no one else because he helps people find and select training companies, one of which he evaluates as our company, the Learning Network. By the way, I forgot everyone to say, on behalf of the Learning Network, welcome to the show. And thank you to my sponsors, C-Suite TV and C-Suite Radio. That's probably because I'm so excited to have John here because we're going to spend our time really talking about the future of learning, which I think is really important. So, John, I'm going to give you a softball to start. What is AI going to do to learning? How is that going to change the world? And maybe we could talk a little further out, not like necessarily what it's going to mean today, but maybe what it's going to mean in a year or two down the road. What are your thoughts on AI and training?
Well, it's changing everything. As part of my responsibilities, I get to evaluate different learning system providers, lots of them in a given year. And recently, I just reviewed about 100 of them. And every single learning system vendor has AI on their innovation list of things they're doing now, things that they're growing towards. And it's really incredible about how it's changing everything. I've spent almost 30 years in the industry, a lot of it developing content. And what's happening now with the content development process, the online learning process, is just astounding. Times are being reduced by 75% to create content, and AI is helping in everything from writing it for sure, from generative to generating pictures to doing the instructional design, writing the objectives, tagging the skills, tagging the keywords, really creating whole courses. And so, right now, and what's coming in the future is really a whole new way to approach how you develop online content and the speed and flexibility of how you develop online content. AI is also changing, and what you'll see in the future that you don't see today is now in many corporations you develop a SCORM course and you might deliver that to 10 or 20 or 30,000 people, but because of AI and adaptive learning and the ability to modify that content based on your preferences, what you've taken before, your job, your role, your language, your years in the job, that content can be modified on the fly. And so instead of creating one SCORM course for 30,000, you're essentially creating 30,000 different adaptive courses personalized specifically for the learner. And so those are just a couple of things that are changing.
Just modest change,
Just modest
just a
changes.
tiny tweak of the industry. So John, what I'm hearing is this is going to make training faster, better, more customized, which
Right.
I totally agree. I also think, and by the way, the Learning Network is like all into AI. I mean, using it to make things better, particularly translation, it's like I think it's going to be
Mhm.
huge. One of the things that I'm seeing is the idea of just-in-time training, and that AI can really impact that, so that when people need to get knowledge about how to do something, rather than going into the LMS and trying to figure out what course they need to take, it can really use AI. Are you seeing that in part of the discussion of how it becomes a just-in-time training tool?
Hmm. Well, I see just-in-time training has been a popular theme, popular trend here for the last few years of taking training into Slack, into Microsoft Teams, into where you're at in your daily job, into your product, and all that's done more with integration and less with AI. So, but that is a super trend that's happening. But with AI, what I see that's new and incremental is this concept of these learning bots, these learning assistants, these learning partners. They go by a lot of different names, where just with real language, you can ask anything. And then that bot goes and searches within videos, within PDFs, within your knowledge base, within your user community to be able to pull that answer and create, personalized and specific needing just when you need it, while you're working in that software product, while you're operating that medical device machine. And so that ability for the bot to basically take where you're at and then look at all the available information and come back with a concise answer to get you to the next step, that's here today. And that's just getting better and better. Last year, I didn't see any learning bots. This year, and I review all these because we have an annual awards process where we basically catalog the capabilities of the vendors. And just in 1 year, like 15 or maybe 20% of the organizations have learner bots or administrative bots where it wasn't last year. So I think that whole process of getting that learning faster when you need it, it's something that we've always strived for, but now technology is catching up to actually make it a reality.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's certainly for us a major initiative, one in which I'm heading up. So I'm like totally excited by it. Totally excited by it. I think if we put our hats on and we think 10 years from now,
Mhm.
and maybe much faster, I see employees wearing, HoloLens things where if they're working in a factory or doing whatever job that they're doing, where the AI, the learning tools and things are actually giving people direction or warning them, oh, that, you're about to make a mistake. And that training will be literally instantaneous with the employee as they're doing their job. Do you see that as a possibility?
I do. I already, see aspects of that today. I think in 10 years there won't be a concept of an LMS anymore. Maybe there's a repository of learning, but just to bring everything into your everyday life at the point of need, I think that's where it's all going. In some ways it's already there. Your organization specializes in virtual reality and, XR, and you're basically training them on how to do the system right before they get on a production line, for example. Now the next step of that is just really the analytics to crunch the data on how they're actually performing the task to then drive or spur new learning opportunities to be able to close any potential gaps or maybe errors that they're making.
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff is already happening today, and it's only going to get faster and quicker as technology here proceeds. 10 years from now is almost too far to talk in the future based on what I've seen in the last year, the speed of innovation.
You said something very interesting for a guy whose living is primarily made in reviewing and finding the right learning management system,
I
that
know.
maybe there eventually won't be one because it will be replaced by an AI training. I've never thought of that. I think that's a very insightful thought.
I just hope it doesn't happen before I retire.
You'll just be reviewing different bots and different
Yeah, I'll
different.
be the bot guy.
Yeah, there'll be nothing. There will always be a need for people to help people evaluate and make decisions. And to that point, I think the number I heard, you might know better than I, is there like 8 or 9 thousand different LMSs out there, and I think it probably even more than that. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens, because what it took to be an LMS 2 years ago and what it takes to be a good LMS today is very different. And each
Oh,
year
for
it's going
sure.
to become tougher and tougher.
Yeah, for sure. I've been in LMSs now for 22 years, and it's almost humorous what we thought an LMS was 2 decades ago, to even 10 years ago to now. The capabilities, the depth. You ever remember the days where everybody hated their LMS? That's such a thing of the past.
Yeah.
Of the innovation has just been spectacular. And when you see what they can do now and the breadth of not just matching learners with content, but all the ancillary things that tie together from content creation, performance support, skill, continuous learning, are all part of normal suites now, along with analytics and tying to business results. And the business of learning is exactly that. It's kind of went from learning management to, how is learning a strategic competitive differentiator? And the best organizations are using it as such.
It's interesting that the show is Training Unleashed. Our premise is that companies don't invest in training, but if you do, you unleash it. And I think the changes and shifting that we're seeing in AI and XR, which is what we're going to talk about next in a few seconds, are opening up people's eyes to what the possibilities are, because the quality, the economic efficiencies, all of those things are making training much more appealing. Let's talk about what you're seeing. And I think the new term is XR. Why don't you, for our audience sake, define XR, because a lot of people don't know what XR is. And then let's talk about XR a little bit.
Well, luckily, I just had a podcast with your CEO who taught me exactly what XR is. So it's really extended reality, and it's an umbrella term that contains all the mixed reality, virtual reality, augmented reality, all those realities, which are really just different flavors of technology and that can be applied to learning. And XR is really just the umbrella type of that. And I think for the audience, when you think about that, just, if you have any longevity or a little bit long in the tooth, it's really just another form of content. Like Flash used to be a form of content, and then WBTs, and then online learning. These are just other types that can be used for certain circumstances to drive real significant business value.
It's interesting you say that because I think what it does is incredible, but it's certainly overkill for a lot of types of training.
Sure.
At the same token, it actually opens up the door for things that people never really were able to do e-learning for, and things that used to have to be done in person can now be done virtually through extended reality tool sets. So obviously our company's very big in XR, but maybe if you could maybe share some use cases, some of the things that you see, and it
Hmm.
certainly doesn't need to be ours. I know you met with Richards, but just how people are using XR today.
Hmm. Well, I think the big shift, Evan, is in the past and for many years, knowledge assessments were really about knowing information. And so, could you pass a test? And can you pass multiple choice test on what this is or why this is? But where that really fell down was hands on. Can you actually do it? Can you prove that you do it? And so XR and VR has a lot of application in that prove it phase, much more than that for sure. But that's where I see a lot of the low hanging fruit is you can teach somebody how to change a spark plug in a Bobcat skid loader, but until they actually, crank that wrench and pull it out and clean it off and stick the new one in, you really don't know if they can actually do it to the specs. And so you have two choices at that point. You can go find yourself a Bobcat skid loader and, a wrench and some time and an evaluator and go do that. Or, you can create some XR VR and do it once and, allow them to test and prove that over time 10,000 times and for the cost of doing it once. And so that hands-on part, I think, is really critical. The second part of that hands-on is anything that's dangerous. So if you're operating crane equipment, you're in the military, you're flying a jet, you're operating, big, huge track loaders inside of mines, you're a firefighter, all these things, they're really hard to, one, you can't do it on multiple choice tests. And two, it's really hard to, burn a building down and test whether you know your knowledge, your knowledge or not. So these are all tools now that allow professionals in dangerous occupations to get the skills they need without, doing it live, without, subjecting themselves to the danger and the risk of doing it. So those are just two examples, I think, of the hands-on nature that are really adding a lot of benefit. And oh, here's a third one, and this is a great one with my own brother. My brother runs a precision manufacturing organization, and they create these multi-million-dollar lines to make anything. And the time they can't pull those lines down to train people because the cost of those millions of dollars and to make those products, like every single minute, every single second of that production line is tied to profitability. So how do you train people on it? Do you build a whole second multi-million dollar line just for training? No, it's not practical. Do you tolerate that machine having mistakes or user operator errors because you don't want to train? Unfortunately, that's what a lot of organizations do. So XR and VR is a way that you can basically recreate that multi-million dollar line, but you do it for a few $1,000s. You train your operators in advance, you certify them, or you train them when they're going right on the line. Right before they
Yeah.
get on there, here's a quick little 5-minute review of the things that you have to do. All of that saves millions and millions of dollars in downtime and unproductivity or improductivity. and are all just great uses for this new technology that now I think is fairly affordable to do things like that, especially when you consider the downside.
You said something that triggered a thought for me, which is when you talked about pilots and helicopters and training in the Army, in the Air Force, I guess, not in the Army. I guess in the Army they have pilots too. I mean, they spend tens of millions of dollars to build flight simulators, right? So if you're going to be a pilot, you're going to go into a flight simulator. They're very, very expensive to build, but they're much cheaper than having people try to practice on jets.
Mm-hmm.
Jet fuel itself can run $20,000 an hour. So that $10 million flight simulator was cheap.
Sure.
But today you can, in essence, build a virtual flight simulator or practice a medical procedure or practice a mechanical, if you're a technician in a truck factory or whatever it is, for a few thousand, 10,000, for relatively low dollar amounts, you basically can create a real simulator that can do all the things that $10 million simulator did, but you're doing it, with a headset on it and a computer,
Mm-hmm.
which is really incredible. And I think it's going to come to tons of industries once they figure it out. And we work with, I think, 250 or more franchise organizations, and restaurants and cooking food takes a lot of time, energy, money to have people practice making dishes and recipes and things of that nature, all of which can be done in virtual reality really,
Mm-hmm.
really easily.
And it's the same argument as always, if you're Panera Bread or you're, one of these organizations that has 10,000 servers and you roll out a new special, for the month or five new specials for the month, to create a virtual reality that teaches you about that and how to prepare that and how to do it exactly the way they want it with two pickles here and just this much of this condiment. And so that it's the same everywhere in the world, in that Panera Bread, it's a drop in the bucket when you think of spending 10 or $20,000 on one piece of training that can do that much good across that much people. And I
Yeah.
think that's part of the whole business of learning is don't be shy about spending money because it's not about spending money. It's about the impact. It's about moving the business needle in these organizations. And if you focus on moving needles that you can measure, then all of a sudden the cost of virtual reality, the cost of learning technology just becomes a rounding error if you just tie it to business and actually doing things like selling more or reducing churn or increasing customer satisfaction. All those things have real dollar or real monetary values, and learning programs that can tie to that, then it just doesn't matter what things cost anymore because the benefits so outweigh the costs.
You're really unleashing training right now. So you're on topic for this podcast for sure. Ever feel like your training sessions are getting a little old, a little tired? Want to add some excitement with some extended reality, virtual reality, augmented reality, 360 training? Well, you can do that today with the Learning Network. Your employees can immerse themselves in real-world scenarios, boosting engagement, more importantly, increasing knowledge retention. Learn more today by going to learning.net and book a demo and learn all about extended reality training. The time is now. One of the aspects that I think is incredible, and I know for us, we're really investing in this quite heavily, which is actually tracking the user while doing the training to constantly improve the training, but maybe not just constantly improving the training, but maybe constantly improving the actual activity. So if you're training somebody on how to do something and they're constantly doing things a little differently, you might go, well, maybe we need to change our process because we're learning from the learner ways to make things more efficient. Or we're learning how to teach the learner better because our learning doesn't really fit what we're trying to do. Do you see that playing a big role where
I
training becomes more than just training?
two answers to that. That one of the first part is that's a great application of AI that I'm seeing is, the monitoring of every click of how everybody goes through a particular training, what they click on, what they get stuck on. And if you take all of that data, it's almost impossible to analyze by yourself. And so AI is really showing strong inside of reporting and analytics to be able to crunch huge data sets like that to get to something operable that you can use to improve your training. That's the one answer. The second thing that I've been seeing recently, and this is just evolving, is really tying business systems together with learning systems to monitor exactly what's happening and really have training interventions in real time. So if you are actually monitoring that same Panera bread, making that sandwich and you're observing, that they're not putting it on right or putting too little on, to automatically have an intervention that's monitoring that and pushing that out. And so I just saw a solution the other day that's their whole thing is they try to find what those triggers are inside an organization, and their whole solution is monitoring those triggers and then solving them with immediate training at the time. And so training isn't something over here and your work isn't something over here. They're really the exact same thing to get you to, the most high level of performance possible, productivity possible.
So, John, I could talk to you forever. We had a great pre-talk. I love having you on the show. I
Thanks.
I think our listeners and our viewers would love to know more about you and your company and how you help people, because the selection of the right learning partner is really critical for companies to be successful. And you really help people avoid mistakes and maybe more importantly, unleash training properly.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
please tell us about your company.
Well, thanks very much. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Talented Learning. And as I mentioned, I've been in this industry quite a few years. And I spent 14 years. So I'm an instructional technologist by education, but I spent 14 years selling enterprise learning management systems for two different providers. And during that time, I became an expert in selling learning management systems and really understanding the process. And what I found in the process is that there was a lot of poor buyers out there. Buyers just weren't any good at buying. And it's not surprising, how often do you go out and buy a $1 million system, an enterprise system? It's, not every day in your career. And so throughout my career, I just was able to almost smell a poor buyer or a great buyer, the reverse, in the first phone call of their level of preparedness and how they were going about it. But what I found is that for every good buyer I found a whole bunch of mediocre and poor buyers. And when you buy poorly, then you're hurting your organization. You're not unleashing the right power. You're not really making an impact if you buy the wrong learning technology. And as Evan said, there's thousands of different learning technology products out there. So how do you buy the right one? And at one point, I thought that.
If I could just add here, because I think this is important, in defense of those poor buyers, no one has the time to do the work you do,
Yeah,
right? No one has the time to go and look at hundreds of LMSs. No one. In defense of the poor buyer,
it's
it's
hard.
impossible to be a good buyer. People
Yeah.
need companies like yourself to help them make intelligent decisions.
Yeah. And that's all Talented Learning does. Sorry for the big preamble, but I decided that there was an opportunity to help buyers be better. So be better by better education. So on Talented Learning, we provide a ton of free education. We also have educational podcast and all of our content. We have hundreds and hundreds of blog articles that we've written, all for the public sector to understand how to buy better, how to document your requirements, how to tie it to business needs, how to evaluate different vendor options, and then we have all kinds of research that we keep publicly on the site so that buyers can really research in a safe place, including the Learning Network. You can see demonstrations of VR, applications, for example, and see if you're in the right place before you contact a vendor. So we provide all of that out in the public sphere for the good of everybody, because buyers want to find the right sellers that specialize in what they do, and sellers are more successful when they're not stretching, but they're finding buyers that are right within their core set of capabilities. And so at Talented Learning, we try to make that happen both electronically, and then we have a ton of services from a consulting standpoint, both very informal to very formal, to help organizations define their requirements, shortlist appropriate vendors, and then conduct a professional buying process. And all of that is to make sure that you don't make a mistake and that you can truly unleash the power of education in your organization, both for your employees, but also for your extended audiences, channel partners, and customers.
John, would you share your URL so everyone knows your website and how to reach you?
It's talentedlearning.com.
Talentedlearning.com. Always got to say it at least twice because people are listening. Some of them are driving, but talentedlearning.com. I know you have an offer for everyone. Do you want to share what the offer is?
Yeah, we have lots of one of the things we have is our analysis of the top 50 learning systems. And we have what's called a right fit grid where we map these vendors not based on anything other than the common characteristics of their buyers. And so what we try to do is take a fresh approach so that you could basically identify yourself with the type of characteristics you have, the type of audiences, what your learning scenario is, and then look at this grid and find your way to the right subset of vendors that you can evaluate. And that tool itself just saves hours and weeks in any given selection process because as Evan said, you can't do what I do. I spent 10 years trying to get to those 10,000 vendors. I got to about 500 of them. And so the process needs to be to try to narrow down logically and intelligently to a subset that you can evaluate more deeply. The last thing you want to do is try to evaluate 1,000 vendors. You want to find the right 10, the right 5, and look at them really deeply to find your best partner.
So if you want to find John's website and find a direct link to that tool that he discussed, go to trainingunleashed.net. John Leh, Leh spelled L-E-H, and you'll be able to find the episode, but more importantly, you'll be able to find all the information, all the contact information for John. John, before we end the show, and I know you know this, and I know our listeners listen for it, if you had one tip to share with the audience, what would that tip be?
My tip is that learning needs to be tied to business metrics. Everything that you do, if you can't draw a direct line to how you're impacting your business, you're just creating training for the sake of creating training. And so, if you truly want that proverbial seat at the executive table, if you really truly want to make a difference in your business, it's critical that you start from the business goals and work backwards. Our customer satisfaction is in the dumps. What do we need to do to improve that? And work backwards from there. Our sales, our channel sales are growing way slower than anticipated. What do we need to solve that problem? Work backwards from there, build the training, measure the results, the impact that you're having. If you tie all of your training activities, now certainly some are going to be compliance and they're not tied to revenue. That's just the necessary evil of training. But all the rest of it, all the voluntary stuff organizations do, tie it to business. And what you'll find is that budgets don't become a problem and you're making your company or your organization more competitive. And nothing is better to really get the respect of your organization, but more importantly, to have them leverage your organization when new products are coming out, new things, when mergers or acquisitions, that training is not the last thing that they think of, but they bring you all the way up front because they know that everything that you're doing is moving the business needle. And in my travels, when I see organizations like that, they're the ones I have on my podcast because that's the example, I want to follow and I want everybody else to follow.
John, it's such a great tip, and it's really the key to be successful in your role as a leader of a training organization is to really take training and look at the ROI and why it's a good investment. I just want to share this story because it's to your point. A very large major restaurant chain we were working with and talking, and he comes to me and he says, we have to put a freeze because there's a budgetary freeze for the entire company because our sales are down. So we're going to have to put off the project. And I said to him, are they trying to save expenses? Is that the purpose of the freeze? He goes, yeah. I said, so if you could show them how this training would help them improve profitability within the same fiscal year that they're investing in it, then it would be helpful to the company with their problem with sales being down versus unhelpful, meaning it's cheaper to do the training right than it is to not train. in this particular use case. And he went back to his management team, and even though they had a no spending freeze, he was able to build a case that if we do this and this and this is the expected savings that we're going to receive in the company by being more effective doing these things. And we're going to put money to the bottom line more by doing this than not doing this. And they got budget approved. John, I could talk to you forever. Enjoyed having you as a guest. On behalf of the Learning Network, thank you. I want to thank the audience on behalf of the Learning Network, and of course, myself. I want to thank our sponsors, C-Suite TV and C-Suite Radio, and remind everyone you can find us on YouTube, the Training Unleashed Network, and please go and subscribe. Take care, everyone. Have a great day.